Добрий день всім. Я вітаю вас.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Ukraine Media Center to Ukraine Forum. I'm Olga Atamanova, and now we'll tell you about the schedule of our events for today. At 1:30 p.m., we will have Yuriy in our studio, Deputy Minister of Infrastructure of Ukraine, and Igor Barsky, Director of Mariupol Commercial Seaport, state-owned company. We will discuss the operations of the seaports during the wartime and destruction of damage to infrastructure and new alternative logistics chains. At 2:30 p.m. we'll have Ivana Klimpus-Shintsadze, Parliament member of Ukraine, and we'll discuss the appeal of the Verkhovna Rada, the Parliament of Ukraine, to the global community requesting to recognize the Russian Federation as a terrorist organization. Why it is important and why do we need it? At 3 p.m. we'll have Tamila Tasheva in our studio. She is permanent representative of the President of Ukraine for the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, and we'll discuss with her first steps in this position and how Ukraine's position will change about the occupation of Crimea and how Crimean platform operates during the wartime. And right now with us we have Yuriy Ihnat, spokesperson of the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Mr. Ihnat, you're welcome. Can you hear us? Mr. Ihnat, you're welcome. Can you hear us? Seems that we have some problem with these communications. Now we'll fix those, and in the meantime I'll tell you that we'll discuss with Yuriy how we managed to change the course of this war in the sky with overwhelming enemy's forces, how we managed to do it. 1, 2, 3. Yuriy, can you hear us? Yuriy cannot hear us. We tried to restore communications with Yuriy. I hope we'll manage to do it. Yuriy, are you with us? One, two, three. I cannot hear you. Mr. Ihnat, could you please try and restart your Zoom if you can hear us? Yuriy, can you hear us? Now Yuriy Ihnat, the spokesperson of Air Forces, will reconnect, restart his system. We'll try again to connect with him. I'd like to remind you that right now online we have Yuriy Ihnat, spokesperson of the Air Force Command of Ukrainian Armed Forces, and we'll try and reconnect now. Unfortunately, sometimes we have communication problems, but we understand that our armed forces are in such places where there may be problems with communications. Yeah, no, I can hear you. So, good afternoon again. Yuriy, are you with us? Can you hear us? We are glad to have you with us. We are glad that you can hear us now. You're welcome. Mr. Ihnat, could you please tell us about our advantage in the sky and how you managed to change the course of this war while understanding that there was overwhelming enemy's force. Your microphone is muted. Please unmute yourself. One, two, three, sound check. One, two, three, four, five. Yuriy, can you hear us? Yuriy. Dear colleagues, I'd like to apologize for these technical problems. Now we'll fix all those problems and we will be back in 5 minutes.
Прошу зупинити трансляцію. Зараз ми повернемося. Дякую всім за розуміння.
Thank you for understanding.
Добрий день ще раз. Вибачаю за наші технічні трошки проблеми, які ви
Again, good afternoon. Sorry for those technical problems we got now. We have re-established our communications, and now we have Yuriy Ihnat with us, the spokesperson of the Air Force Command of Ukrainian Armed Forces. Mr. Ihnat, you're welcome. Mr. Ihnat, I'd like to ask you, let's discuss the air superiority of Ukraine. How was it possible to change the course of the war in the sky, even though we all understand that the enemy had technical advantages in the air? You know, maybe advantages or superiority is not exactly the right word here. Well, to say that Ukraine controls the airspace or the government-controlled territory, definitely we can say that, because the situation that we had at the beginning of that full-scale invasion on the 24th of February, when airplanes and helicopters of those occupying forces were flying around Kiev. After that, after heavy battles in the air and on the ground, our air forces managed to take control of the sky, of the air, and now the enemy's combat aircraft do not enter the area of covered by our air defense, and also they do not engage with our fighter jets, our interceptors, but there is that territory temporarily controlled by them, which they filled with their defense systems. I mean, Donetsk, Luhansk Oblast, and some part of Kherson Oblast, like the east of Ukraine. And there, you know, the enemy incurred significant losses in the first weeks of the war, and currently we already have almost 200 aircraft, almost 2 airplanes of the enemy that we hit, or almost 150 helicopters and a lot of UAVs and cruise missiles. So the enemy incurred significant losses, and it's about modern aircraft, it's about their pilots who died or have been wounded. So they changed their tactics, and now for several weeks they don't enter anymore the airspace controlled by us. Mr. Ihnat, speaking about the operations of our air defense, could you please tell us briefly how our air defense works, and can you announce any statistics about targets that we have hit? I already mentioned statistics. Airplanes and helicopters, there are about 200 airplanes and 150 helicopters, a lot of aviation equipment, hit more than 100 unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, or drones. You know, we could, speaking about the maximum effectiveness, we can say that a week or 2 weeks ago there was 300 targets hit by our ground-to-air missiles of our air forces, because this is the key tool we use to down Russian airplanes. Also, of course, they are also hit by personal portable anti-air missiles, and even 3 helicopters have been downed using anti-tank missiles, and there are also interceptors, but they were mostly used during the first days of the war. So now the key threat for enemy's aviation is Buk M1 and S-300 anti-aircraft missiles. There has been some information that now our skies are covered by outdated anti-aircraft units. Can we discuss any upgrade, any modification of our air defense? Yeah, of course, we are fighting using equipment made in 1980s, so it has been more than 40 years that those units have been in operation and those rockets have been manufactured. The enemy also has such similar equipment, but these are upgraded types of equipment like S-400, Buk M1, Buk M2, Buk M3. They also have Panzer units and others. Unfortunately, we only have the equipment that we got since that old time, but we have skilled, well-trained professional specialists, and those well-trained professionals use this equipment that we have to destroy enemy's equipment, and their commitment and their self-sacrifice and their patriotism deserves to be described in movies and books, and it will be described in books and movies what is happening today. But to use to do everything, we need some support with some assistance, because we have some losses in terms of both aviation and air defense missiles, and some equipment fails because it's old, and every day we launch a lot of missiles, a lot of rockets, and also the enemy destroys our equipment. We destroy theirs and they destroy ours, so we still need to replenish and upgrade our equipment. And of course we appreciate help from our Western partners, from the USA and the UK, and we thank the whole world for the sanctions, for that sanction pressure on Russia, for that humanitarian aid, financial aid, for all those weapons already provided to Ukraine, for Lend-Lease law passed already. But speaking about the air forces, currently we need some serious equipment in order to protect our sky, to cover and protect the sky over Ukraine, over our nuclear power plants, to save lives of our innocent civilians. And we mentioned many times already what sort of equipment we would like to receive. There have been negotiations in place. Of course, we will not describe them in detail. Of course, we also thank for those Soviet-made air defense units. We received something from Slovak Republic, and maybe we'll receive some more. It's about Buk and S-300 and Soviet aircraft, Soviet airplanes, which have strengthened our air superiority, air advantage. But still we need modern weapons, because now the enemy overwhelms us in both qualitative and quantitative terms. We are talking about next generation aircraft, 4++ and 5th generation. So now we have airplanes with powerful radars, powerful missiles, so that they could see the enemy from 100-kilometer distance, and rockets that can be launched from such distance, with radio electronic warfare. And we hope that there will be some positive decision made to provide fighter jets to Ukraine, F-15, F-16 of certain modifications, so that our pilots will be able to master them. And I mean, it's both about how to fly them and how to fight using them. We have some plan how to do it. Of course, we'll use help from our partners, use their base for training, but we are ready to do it in a short time frame. I'm not to quote particular time frames, but we are ready to train our pilots to use those types of weapons and to counter Russian high-tech airplanes in the skies, because they overwhelm us 1-6 at the moment. Speaking about anti-aircraft rockets that we would like to see to replace those Bukem-1 and S-300, we already mentioned, and the President of Ukraine already mentioned, and the government has already made decisions, and now we have Norway, American NASAMS with Abram 120 US-made rockets, so that in this situation that we have, they can resist very effectively the Russian Air Force. This is a mobile air defense system, and in our current situation, it would fit our air forces in a very good way. Speaking about longer-term prospects, of course, we would like to get such air defense systems as US-made Patriot, which is one of the best models worldwide, and it can hit not only aircraft but also rockets. It's not only air defense but also rocket defense system. Long before the war, we had that vision 2035 for our air forces, and we described all these things there, but there was a very high cost of those weapons, and this process was very slow, and unfortunately huge steps have not been made to rearm ourselves with Western weapons. Mr. Ihnat, we keep hearing about enemies' aircraft being hit, but speaking in percentage terms, how much we have destroyed the enemy's potential in the sky? Can you assess the percentage somehow, approximately? At the beginning of the war, even several months before this war, we saw some military exercises in the Republic of Belarus and around the Ukrainian borders in the Black Sea. And of course, our intelligence did analyze the situation, and we saw that there was some concentration of helicopters and other equipment, and about 450 airplanes were around Ukraine in airfields in the Republic of Belarus and Russia, about 250 combat helicopters, so it's 700 aircraft units. That's what the enemy concentrated around Ukraine, and that was some of the best types of equipment that they had in those airfields. Sukhoi 30, 34, 35, Kama 52 helicopters and others, and that's mostly the equipment that was hit. Of course, in Russia they still have a lot of airplanes. A lot of them are in the storage, also MiG-29, Sukhoi 27, but of course there's no doubt that the enemy has incurred significant losses. There are also those Sukhoi 25 fighter jets, but they were forced to change their tactics to avoid entering our territory, but now they switched to rocket strikes using Tupolev 160, Tupolev 95, Tupolev 22 M3. They can launch rockets being from above the Caspian Sea, above the Black Sea against the territory of Ukraine, but those rockets, those missiles are very expensive. They cost millions of dollars each, so they mostly use them against infrastructural facilities to make the maximum damage. It's about railway hubs, railway stations. The enemy has been trying to prevent Western weapons from entering Ukraine. But the enemy has incurred, to summarize, the enemy has incurred significant losses. Still, Russia still has a lot of equipment, and we should not have any illusion that they will not use it. We have to be prepared. We have to arm ourselves, and we should, let's hope that due to this Lend-Lease law recently passed, we will get powerful high-tech weapons to give us superiority in the air and on the ground. I cannot but ask you about the ghost of Kiev. We all understand that this is some sort of combined image, consolidated image, but could you share with us stories of the pilots which contributed to that image? You know, that image was not made by pilots. Pilots made every effort, they did everything, and people created that image of the ghost of Kiev. They have already somehow mentioned many pilots as being a ghost of Kiev. Some of them already died. 5 or 6 pilots were named as the ghost of Kiev. In the first days of the war, when there were battles in the air above Kiev, not only above Kiev, but also above Zhytomyr Oblast and Sumy Oblast, but above Kiev, people took a lot of videos, and people started writing that this is some revenge, that this pilot downed one airplane, second airplane, third airplane, and they would think that this is the same pilot, because, you know, on social media, whenever there is a story a good story, it could become viral, and somebody said, look, this is some ghost. And we in the Air Forces treated it in the following way. People want to see some superheroes in the sky. And, you know, in 2 or 3 days, stories went around on social media about that superhero. And we somehow supported it. We wrote a story, wrote a post saying, look what this guy is doing. And people just loved that superhero, and they praised him, and they described his achievements more and more every time, like 40 airplanes, 50 airplanes. Of course, that's impossible realistically, but there has been this image of Ukrainian superhero. Like in the States, they have that Superman superhero in comics and so on. Now we already have that superhero on magazines covers, on big boards, on banking cards, and so on. So people are inspired with this image. This image is based, first of all, on the pilots of the 40th Brigade of Tactical Aviation, which is near Kyiv and implements its assignments to protect the air, protect the sky above the capital city and governmental facilities. And military pilots are, say, sources of this ghost. We say that we are all ghosts. We appear where the enemy does not expect us to appear. Indeed, Yuriy, I would say that this image inspires us, and for us, Ukrainians, maybe all our pilots are those inspiring superheroes. Now, dear journalists, you can ask your questions. You're welcome. Please use the microphone.
Thank you very much. Well, it's very interesting you're sharing this kind of interesting social media platform, some fake something. Well, I think as a people, my interesting why they're doing this, because they think the European people, they are hero. I think it's a kind of an interesting mistake, obviously. My question for you is, we heard about the NATO and the American alliance to have a heavily support for the Air Force, Ukraine Air Force side, and obviously they might interestingly to put more Western modern aircraft and modern jet to your country, to training your pilot to use it in the future. And as you said as well, this is training needed time. So would you please tell me that how long you think that your pilot can be hold on the to use the modern Western jet fight to fly into the sky to fight with your enemy? Thank you very much.
Зрозуміло.
I got your question. I would say that those aircraft we already mentioned, the F-15, F-16, those are jets that we already had them in Ukraine, in Myrhorod and Starokostiantyniv, even as early as in 2018. That the National Guard of the state of California who arrived there. F-15C Eagle arrived, and our pilots already had some experience of flying them jointly with American pilots, and they still maintain partner-friendly relationships with those pilots. And those aircrafts are approximately the same generation. F-15, F-16 are also the same generation as MiG-29 and Sukhoi 27 in terms of manufacturing dates and technology level. But F-15 and F-16 have been seriously upgraded, modernized in terms of weapons, in terms of radars, in terms of other systems, navigational systems. They have been upgraded. And, you know, to fly them for a Ukrainian pilot, a Ukrainian professional pilot with some combat experience, it's not a problem. No problem with that. It's about several weeks. In several weeks, our pilots will feel great in the cockpit of those American airplanes, American jets. Another thing is to learn how to fight using those jets, to use their weapons. That's a bit more difficult, but our pilots are ready and willing to spend days and nights to learn as quickly as possible. And we could do it, not only in Ukraine. we are ready to send our pilots. We have sufficient numbers of pilots at the moment. We have sufficient numbers. Their pilots drafted from the reserve, our veteran pilots who are still able to fly, as well as young pilots who have been fighting in the sky already. And the young graduates of military schools, we can send them for training to the United States, to NATO, allies, NATO partner countries, and there is a technology, there are instructors, there are those training facilities, so that they will train as quickly as possible how to use those jets. And it will enable us to protect our sky on our own. Maybe we don't need a lot of that equipment. Of course, the more the better. We have a big country, but in this situation, you know, if we get that, say, F-16 or F-15, which will fight against Russian airplanes, it will radically change the balance of force. Thank you, Mr. Ihnat. Colleagues, do you have any other questions? No more questions. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for finding time and sharing this very important information. Thank you. And dear friends, I'd like to briefly remind you of our schedule for today. At 1:30 p.m. here in our studio, we'll have Yuriy, Deputy Minister of Infrastructure of Ukraine, and Igor Barsky, Director of Mariupol Commercial Seaport Company. Will discuss the operations of seaports in these very difficult conditions. At 2:30 p.m. we'll have Ivana Klimpush-Sinsadze, Deputy of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, the Parliament member, and we'll discuss with her the Verkhovna Rada's appeal to the global community requesting to designate Russian Federation as a terrorist organization. And at 3 p.m. we'll have Tamila Tasheva, permanent representative of the President of Ukraine in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, and we'll discuss with Tamila Tasheva how our Ukraine strategy will change about the occupation of Crimea and how Crimean platform operates during the wartime. Please stay with us. See you. Thank you.